Chapter 1. Cheating, worth it till it's not. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Kaz for Men says here that you were supposed to be a pro athlete. What happened there? The recruiter asked me as I sat across the desk from him. The office was hot even with the windows open and 2 fans, and the man was showing it. I was fine, and I wasn't really in the mood to talk about that. I wanted to help out and serve for my country, I said, thinking that was what every gung-ho recruit said that walked in the door. Just as I had thought, the man gave me a wicked grin that said I had no idea what I was in for. Maybe, but I just wanted to get out of here and off the continent. Fine, everything looks good, and we have no reason not to take you if this is what you want. Be back here at 0.6 hours, and I suggest that you come early, or you will have a very long first week, the recruitment officer told me, and I nodded to him respectfully and left the room. After leaving the building, I went over to my old Ford Tempo and got inside. Once I closed the door, I just sat there for a minute, sitting and thinking about the past week. I was exposed as a cheater, caught for juicing, tossed out of MMA, and my instructor Tom wasn't answering my calls. I couldn't blame him, but my dream job of being a fighter was gone, and now I was here. My parents didn't know yet, but they would find out on the news tonight. They were just releasing the information now. I had known for a month now, but I wasn't even allowed to talk about it until now. 30.2, and I had already been fighting for 7 years, but I was just about to get my big chance at a real fight. That was all pulled away because I couldn't put the juice down and just get stronger on my own, and now I was paying for it. I wanted to punch the steering wheel of my car, but I was worried the damn thing might fall apart, and at this moment, I was just getting by. I had earned some money fighting, but I had big dreams and spent it almost as fast as I made it. Money was cheap then, but now I was forced to watch all my spending if I wanted to eat and have a roof over my head. So, the army was my best bet. I was smart in school, but after graduating, I went straight into a fight, even turning down 2 scholarship offers. I didn't care about school. What I cared about was the thrill of the out person trying their best to beat you before you took them down. There was hardly anything in this world that could provide me with that kind of adrenaline, but I thought that shooting guns and running for my life might be close substitutes. I knew I didn't want to stay here, and the army wasn't here. Shaking my head and then starting my car was all I could do, and it did, thankfully. I pulled out into the street and started to make my way out of town as the sun was slowly sinking into my mirror. I had to turn my head a bit to keep the glare from it out of my eyes. The road had no curves in it for the first bit, so the sun always got me on my way home. After the short drive, I reached the valley that my house was built on after about 15 minutes of driving. I took a right at the bottom of the hill and turned onto a gravel road that I followed for about 20 minutes. Driving slowly was the only way to keep my car in one piece. Only a few of us lived down here, so the grader had a nasty tendency to skip us. I couldn't entirely fault him for his logic. It was a dead end, and none of the driveways were big enough to turn around in, but that left the road with ruts. I finally pulled into my yard, and it was getting late. Even though I live far out on my own, I had no pets or animals, so no one was waiting to greet me. Story of my life, but I was used to that, and tomorrow I would be changing my carefree life to one of order and unending training. That would be that bad, just another thing to get used to, and I would be forced to get strong without having help from some drugs. I parked the car near the house and got out, fully intending to go in and grab the jar of pickled eggs. I would watch a fight or 2 before bed after devouring the remains of the jar, but something caught my eye out in the bushes. A glowing red light came from deep in the bushes just behind my house. That made me curious, but it started to get dark, so I couldn't just run in blind. So, I ran up to my deck and grabbed a flashlight from inside my door. I was about to leave but turned back and grabbed my large hunting knife before turning back to leave the house. Turning back to the house briefly, I considered grabbing a gun, but it probably was just some people dirt biking out here and left their bike. People around here were friendly, and I didn't mind people riding dirt bikes on the trails around my house, but it was too late for them to be out. I started into the forest, holding my light but not turning it on yet. There was no need, the sun was not completely gone. It was just hitting twilight when I reached the light, and it was starting to get dark out, but the red light lit the clearing up that I had walked into. There was a hole in the ground, and stairs were leading down. The red light came from the hole, but I was not moving to get closer to it yet. This was more than strange because I had been back out in this clearing many times over the years. This house and land had been one of my friend's grandparents, and we used to spend a lot of time out here. There had never been a hole or anything like this, and I really wasn't sure what it meant, but something about the entrance into the ground called to me. I was torn on what to do, but at the same time, there couldn't be any harm in going to take a look, right? Chapter 2. The Easy Choice. Without cheating. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. I was already walking down the stairs, and the place smelled old and musty, like walking into an abandoned house. There were no bugs or cobwebs, which didn't really make much sense considering the layer of dust on the stone steps I was stepping on. I was leaving tracks, and maybe it was just the light that was making the bugs stay away. I had already walked about 3 flights worth of stairs, and the tunnel was curving as I went. What am I doing? I said to myself as I stopped. I needed to get back to the house and eat and get to bed. I had made my choice, and like the man had said, I didn't want to be late, but there was that little part of me that just had to know. I couldn't come this far and not take a look, and it had just dawned on me that the light was being impossibly shown all the way to my house. That didn't make any sense, and when I turned around, there was barely any light for me to see behind me. I decided to keep going, and at this point, I was at the point where I had come this far, and not going the rest of the way would eat me up. I started to walk again, and within 5 minutes, I had reached the source of the light. It was almost like the tunnel had been waiting for me to commit to my curiosity, and it got me. Now I stood in front of a wall with a massive 30 centimeters tall ruby dot-like semicircular gem protruding from the wall. The red light was coming from it, and I just discounted the fact that it barely glowed being in front of it now. I reached forward to feel the sphere, but the moment my finger touched the glowing red globe, I fell to the ground. Pain like I had never felt before ripped through my body, making me spasm on the ground as my muscles were ripped apart inside of my body. I screamed in unending agony as I felt my bone cracking and break, but then healing only to do it again. I foamed and spit sprays of blood on the floor, making blood turn to sticky mud with the dust. My body shook, and I spasmed violently, and the pain started to eat its way into my brain, but then it stopped. I rolled over and vomited out more blood, but that made me feel better. The pain was gone like it had never been, and even though I knew it had happened, all that mattered was that I was able to move and breathe again. Something had just changed inside of me, every bone in my body had been broken, and every muscle torn. I felt different now, more muscular, but not by much, but then a voice in my head almost scared the life out of me that I was so dearly just fighting for. The voice was deep and old and not that impressed to be talking with me, and that was fair. I just had my body ripped apart, so I wasn't really in the mood for a chat. Do I need it? Isn't that like some kind of cheat? What just happened to me? I asked out loud as I picked myself up off the ground. Your body is now built to absorb the essence of the monsters you kill, but all monsters in this world have the same power. I am offering you cheat system, so I can get to the top easier, right? I asked, cutting the voice off. Chapter 3. Jilly, the Thirsty Omniacade. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. I poked my head around the corner to find the woman that turned out to be a busty redhead, but I could only see her from the breasts up. Her heaving melons and erect nipples were barely covered and bulging out. Pointed golden yellow tubes she wore to cover herself left nothing to the imagination, and I was starting to get hot and bothered from just looking at her. For just stepping out of a hole in the ground, this was a pretty good start. But just where the hell was I? I was looking up, which meant she was like 250 centimeters or so tall. This woman was a monster, but tall chicks weren't that bad. Still, I wasn't here to fraternize, that could come later, and she had that hungry woman look. I didn't want to just leave her, but I also did want to get caught up in whatever mess she was in if it wasn't life-threatening. Hey, sorry, just got here, and didn't want to interrupt your little meeting, with, what was that thing? I heard wings, but I don't know, I said a bit dryly, but the woman didn't seem to be fazed by my lack of expression. The woman looked me up and down, and as she did, two weird looking things sticking out of her head shook. They looked similar to feelers or antennae, something like what you might see on an insect, and my skin started to crawl a bit, but I waited. Oh, you must be one of those men. One of those that has a special system. You are just the handsome fellow to help me from having to do horrible things for the great Oni Dao. The woman complained as her body tipped to the side, and my skin started to crawl with fervor. The redhead moved from behind the stone with repeated clicks of point touching down on the hard stone. At this point, my skin was about ready to crawl off my body, but I was a man, and she was still really hot. I could do worse than a centipede girl. So this demon dog is going to use your body. Like as a sex slave or something. I don't want details. Also, I'm Kaz, I said, offering the woman my hand. At this point, I didn't know what I should call her, and using centipede girl didn't feel right. I tried to look her naked body over to try to get over the fact that she was a giant bug, but the constantly moving little feet kept sending chills down my back when I looked at them. She looked at me strangely, and I used all my reserve manliness to not run away screaming like a little girl as the woman clicked closer to me. I focused on her pretty face as the monster woman came up to me and leaned her face to my hand. I watched in rapt attention as she slowly moved to lick my hand, but then I quickly pulled it away as she tried to bite me. What the hell was with this woman? She just tried to bite my hand. What the hell? Why did you try to bite me? I shouted as I jumped back. I am Jilly, the Umyakade, and I wasn't trying to bite you yet. I can if you want me to, but I will be more gentle than that. It's the flavor of you that I like. I want to lick all the salt off your body. The woman clicked and squealed as she approached me. I was backing up again, trying to keep some distance between us as she advanced on me. I wished with all my heart that she could have been anything else but this. Wishing wasn't going to change anything. My father had a saying he used to tell me when I would wish for something. Wish in one hand, then shit in the other, and then see which would get fuller faster. It was a good saying, and it meant that no amount of wishing could change things, so I took a deep breath and then let it out before speaking. Hold on, the thing that was talking to you before said that you would have to do dirty and unclean things if you didn't pay rent, right? I asked while backing up, but she was moving faster than I could backpedal, and she was gaining on me again. Oh yes. He is horrible and nasty to me, making me do all sorts of depraved things. You should defeat the great Oni Dao, and then I won't have to clean for him anymore. Then I can be your sex slave. Just let me lick your sweet sweaty body. Omyakade said as she advanced on me, but I turned and ran as fast as I could. Thanks, but no thanks. Pay your rent on time next time. I called back as I ran away, but the woman was fast. No way was I getting involved with this crazy woman. This Jilly could go do the laundry and mop the floors if she couldn't pay rent for her hole in the ground. Come back, my precious. I won't bite you if you don't want me to. I can cook and clean for you too while being your faithful sex slave that will let you do anything that you want to me. Jilly cried out to me. I started to run faster, and my body started to push past the normal limits that my body was set at before. The muscles in my legs pumped harder, and I slowly started to put some distance between us. I could hear her squeals slowly getting quieter as I put distance between us, but I needed to keep my attention forward. As much as I would have loved to have a sex slave or just a woman to fool around with, but bugs just weren't my thing. Still, this was a new world, and I might need to start getting used to the weird-looking people if I wanted to be able to make it in this new world, but insects were pushing my limits. Chapter 4. Rock Man, the bad acting monster. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Finding the centipede woman and whatever little winged demon was could only mean one thing. If there were two monsters in this world, that would mean there would be more, and that made me smile. I was hoping that most of them were as hot as the bug lady was. If it hadn't been for those creepy legs, I would have beat that bug girl's kitty like a red-headed stepchild right now. That I really didn't want to have to kill girls, that wasn't something I could do. I mean, I was in a new world, and I was the odd man out from what I understood, but I would have to find ways to deal with them if I had to without hurting them. Maybe I was being stupid for being this way, and it was a dangerous attitude to adopt when I knew the world would be filled with danger. I already had dropped the chance to have the easy way, and now I was saddling myself with more personal restrictions. I had to look at it in the way of just giving myself a handicap in this new life, especially after the way I had acted and cheated in my old life. I was only 30, and really in the prime of my life. So, giving myself some restrictions was good for me, but I wouldn't restrict myself to doing other things with the women if they were willing, hee. This was a whole new world that I could get strong in, but I wouldn't have to fight monsters all the time, right? I was coming up to an open part of the light gray rock-walled canyon. The area was filled with boulder, and many other smaller rocks, and was about 30 meters in diameter. At the opposite side it shrunk back to at the other end, and the canyon continued on. I looked to the left and right, and there were openings for paths just like the one I had just come from on both sides. I turned back to notice something that looked like a shaking rock up ahead of me, and I got excited. Whatever this rock thing was, it was moving, so it was alive, and must be a monster. Finally, something that I could try swinging a fist at, but I slowed down as the creature stood way up. A 4-meter-tall man made out of stone that looked dark gray and jagged stood up with a shell of stone on its back. I started to rethink how I was going to face this situation. The rock thing stood on thick heavy rectangular boulder boots, and its hands were covered the same. The thing looked mean and grouchy and dangerous, but its elbows and knees weren't protected well. It also wasn't made completely out of stone, so I started to let my mind absorb everything to figure out a plan. I wasn't taking Psychopede as my partner. "What do you want, little man?" The rock man asked me in a slow and halting manner like he was missing some stones upstairs. "Just passing by, and you look a bit out of my league, but I need to get by, so do you think I could sneak by?" I asked, trying to buy myself some more time. You just need to pass me." The ugly-looking rock man pondered as he put a ground with his hand on his chin. "Sure, if you don't need to fight, then that's just fine, I don't mind at all." I watched as the troll stepped back with a bow, but I could see the unrestrained grin creeping across his ugly human face, and this guy was a bad actor. I started to walk and act like I had no idea he was about to kick me. I was insulted that he had the nerve to pull his foot back before trying to swing it forward, but I had already scoped a stone up off the ground. It was about the size of my head, and pretty heavy, but my new strength made it feel a lot lighter. Whoosh, the feeling and sound of the foot just barely missing made my clothes flap around, but I had just stepped back casually, seeing the foot coming in almost slow motion. I laughed as I turned around fast and hucked the rock at the kneecap of the leg still on the ground. Whatever this thing was, it had thin elbow and knee joints, and they were just as weak as a human's. The shot I fired struck the monster and sent it tumbling to the ground. I grabbed a bigger rock with a rough 30.5 cm diameter, and walked over to the roaring and whining monster. This rock man thought he was a wise crack. I would be putting an end to this bastard's dirty tricks. "What have you done to me? You broke my leg. Now, what am I going to do? This is all your fault, and now since I am hurt, I activate a quest to force you to go on a quest to help me." The rock thing cried out in an agonized but victorious voice. Nothing happened, and I continued walking forward, but the idea that doing a quest for someone would make you stronger was dumb. So that's what that minor bullshit system was, a way to suck me into random missions instead of just fighting monsters and getting stronger. Wait. You are supposed to be stopping. Why do you have that rock? The rock man said as I got closer to him, raise the rock over my head. The scream was cut off fast, and the rock made a squishing bone-grinding cracking noise as it tore flesh and broke the creature's face. Blood sprayed, and chunks of flesh, broken bone, and brain matter squished out the sides from the force and size of the rock. I stood all the way back up, and I did feel like this was a bit better now, finally getting a bit of natural adrenaline pumping inside of me. There was nobody to take care of, just me trying to get to the top of this monster-filled world without using some dumb cheat system. "Excuse me, I seem to be lost," a sweet hissing voice asked me from behind. I turned around, and I looked at the beautiful face of a woman with snakes for hair. The woman's gray clouded over eyes. Yeah, I think I just lost the game. Chapter 5. Blind Mary, the Medusa. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I wasn't big on monsters, but I was sure that I should be a statue right now, snakes for hair, snake's body from the hips down. I looked back up into Medusa's gray eyes, still not getting stoned. Was she blind? Hello. The cute Medusa asked again, and I finally spoke up. Yeah, I am right in front of you, I said, not really sure what to say at this point. How was she still alive? What kind of monsters survived if they couldn't do what they were supposed to? Oh, what are you? She asked, slithering forward. I didn't move, but I didn't let my guard down either. That would be a great end, killed by stupidity. I am a man, just a human man. Can I ask how you are blind and how you survive while being blind? You are blind, right? I asked as the cute girl ran hands over me, not seeming to mind the fresh gore or the old crusty stuff. I can be pretty good at avoiding getting in trouble, and my lovelies can smell when excited people are around. They can also smell strength and power, but you smell normal, but you said you are a human. Shouldn't you be stronger or something? I have heard that when the old hero dies, a new one enters, the Medusa explained, controlling her hisses, and she finally slithering back from me, but I was kind of hoping she would stay close. I don't like bugs, but snakes I didn't mind, and this girl was beautiful, and she was blind, so I was screwed. There was no way on God green earth that I could leave her behind and ever hope to sleep again. So, what are you doing right now? Like, do you have a home? Are you just lost? I asked curiously and reached out to take her hand. Medusa accepted it and led her away from the massive head that I had just exploded. She couldn't see what I had just done, and that was for the best, but I was still trying to figure out what I was going to do. I don't have a home, but my lovelies always help me find somewhere safe to sleep. Do you have any food? Medusa asked, putting her hands together. Ugh, she was so cute, and this is probably how she had survived for so long. Still, this was supposedly a world full of monsters, weren't they supposed to be mean or something? So, these other monsters don't bother you? I just can't understand why they would leave such a poor, defenseless, and beautiful woman alone. I asked after trying to let go of her hand, but Medusa held on. Because I am poor and defenseless. And you think I am beautiful? Medusa asked, and I started to get level 5 Klingon vibes but knew it was already too late. Yes, but the people in this world are monsters, right? I asked. Yes, but what does that have to do with it? Medusa asked while tilting her head at me. They are monsters, doesn't that make them evil or something? I asked. I was entirely out of my element right now. I had no idea what monsters were like, but the name meant that they were evil to me, but now I was second guessing that concept with the way Medusa was reacting. Am I evil? I am a monster, just like everyone else in this world. Sure, there are some bad ones, but there are some good ones too. Medusa protested, taking my other hand in hers. Okay, I am sure that you guessed that I am not really from around here, and where I come from, monster means scary and evil. The way you are reacting makes it seem like there are just as many good as bad ones, right? I asked, and she got excited, drawing closer to me, her luscious chest a hair space from my own. I was starting to get excited in a very different way, but I shoved those thoughts down and focused on the things she was saying. There are good and bad, but monster is just our race. I can see why you might be confused, and some of us might look scary like me. Medusa said, letting go of my hands to make a scary claws impression, and the snakes even started to wander aimlessly hissing. I'm a full-grown man that enjoys hitting things in his free time, but this was the cutest thing I had ever seen. No wonder she was still alive. Who could hurt this precious beauty? Okay, you're right, but there has to be a bunch of bad ones for me to fight, right? Also, do you have a name, or do I just call you Medusa? I asked because it was starting to feel weird referring to her like that. It would be like if she called me human, and I didn't want to come off rude. She seemed a bit airhead but far better than the Umyakade I had just met before this. My name is Mary, and yes, there are more than enough bad ones, but I can take you to meet some of the good ones that I know. Mary said, somehow able to grab my hands from my sides. She started to bob, and her snakes hissed half-heartedly in protest as she did. I was watching other things shake and jiggle as she did, but having a guide to meet some of the so-called friendly monsters could be good. I wasn't really here to make friends, but if I was stuck here, which I was sure that I was, then I should at least say hi. Sure, take me to see these monsters, and maybe we can get something to eat, I said to the beautiful Medusa, Mary, with a warm smile that she couldn't see. Okay, let's go. Mary said with excitement. Mary pulled me along, and I followed, but there was something about a blind woman leading me that just didn't sit right. Chapter 6. Kaz, the Had. You are listening at novelfull.audio. So, we just keep going this way, we turn here, then we just have to go this way for. I think we turn here, Mary told me as she dragged me into a big circle around the inside of the canyon area we were in. Never once did she try to make a left turn to leave the canyon, and she looked so cute wandering around that I let her do 2 laps before stopping her. As adorable as Mary looked, wandering around, we were literally going nowhere, and it was getting hot out. Mary, are you sure you know where you are going? I don't mean to sound like a drag, but we have been walking circles, I said to her as I pulled her to a stop. I could smell the thickening blood, and flies were starting to gather around the monster I had killed. I wanted to get out of here before the smashed head started to stink, and the smell of blood should attract other monsters, I think. I wasn't sure how to take this world with Mary's revelation that not all the monsters in the world were terrible, but instead, they like humans. If that was the case, then I would have to look at each monster case by case, which would make my rise to the top that much more difficult. I think I might be lost, Mary said while blushing. She was also twirling one of her snakes with her finger and starting to get a bit rough with it. I had to grab her hand to stop her before she actually hurt the poor thing. She was strangling the poor thing, but I kept her fidgeting hands busy, holding mine. I found it weird that she didn't know what she was doing, but maybe she was really frazzled right now. She looked embarrassed, and I racked my brain on what to do. Mary was blind, and she had no sense of direction, so I hadn't expected much at first, but if she wasn't guiding me, I didn't want to go slow. I started to get hungry now even more, and I was sorely tempted to cut one of the rock man's legs off. I had almost everything that I would need, but the thought of him having a face did put me off. New world or not, it would be weird. Okay, that's okay, but I don't want to leave you here alone, and I want to move faster. So, 2 questions, first, can we eat that rock man thing that I killed? It had a big rock shell and was pretty tall, I explained to Mary as she was slowly inching herself closer to me. No, they taste awful and will give you a stomach ache, and then you just end up puking up anyways, Mary said with a disgusted look that screamed with familiarity, but that made sense, she would have to eat what she could get, but that made another question push its way out. Did you eat it raw, or did you cook it? I asked her, and her disgusted look turned to one of befuddled confusion. Okay, what is this? You can do something else with the meat? Mary asked, somehow grabbing my hands again as she did. I was starting to think this whole blindness thing was pretty suspect, but the circles we had traveled in and the embarrassment Mary had shown said it was real. Who knew or cared at this point, but there not being cooking in this world was beyond strange. It could just be said in a different word, and maybe there were a bunch of words that don't line up. That, or Mary's blind ass had just never seen it happen because of the obvious. L.C. Then again, this was a world filled with monsters that had no problem eating each other. So, it could just be that there has been no need for cooking, or only a select few races had the ability. Have you ever put the meat over a fire before? And then try to eat it? I asked and was pretty shocked, and Mary reeled back, hissing at me. For a whole entire fraction of a moment, I saw what kind of true terror she could have been if she had been born with sight. Mary's snakes wreathed her head, and all pointed their sightless eyes on me, and Mary scolded me in a deadly voice. "Su doesn't burnest the meats." Mary hissed at me, and that was the end to her menace. She was adorable when she got all riled up, and her hiss lisp came out, but I could tell she was upset. Thankfully I didn't need to hide my gaping grin, but I tried to explain myself to get her to calm her swaying tits down, no matter how much I liked watching them. "I don't burn it, I make it taste better, and it makes it easier to chew. Plus, you can get rid of the stuff that makes you sick by cooking it long enough," I explained to Mary, and she slowly lowered herself back down in front of me. "You can make the stinky meat so we can eat it?" Mary asked, letting a cute excite his escape. I was no chef, and no, I did not plan on teaching the monster world how to cook, but it wasn't hard to barbecue a steak. I nodded to Mary but then smacked my forehead with the palm of my hand and spoke up. "Yes, but I don't have anything to use for fuel to make a fire. We need some dry wood, but I haven't seen anything since I got here. Maybe there might be something up top, but I don't have the skills to free climb a wall that tall," I explained to Mary, and she looked disappointed, but then I froze. I heard multiple slow clicks coming up from behind me, and my skin started to crawl all over my body. I slowly turned around to find Jilly, the Umyakade, moving towards me slowly. "I might be able to help, but it will cost you. Also, hello my little Mary, has this man been doing inappropriate things to you without me present?" Jilly said accusingly to me with triumph, but I could tell that she was a bit winded. "Auntie Jilly. Thank goodness you are here. I got lost." "Well, I got both of us lost," Mary said in a whiny voice different than she hadn't used before, and now she was pushing past me to go to the giant centipede woman. Oh, this was just great. Of course, the Looney Tunes would come as a pair. What next? Wait. I was just kidding. I don't want to know what next is, I pleaded with an unnamed god that probably didn't exist. Someone was laughing. Chapter 7. The system, not done with me yet. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You two aren't related, are you? I asked as Mary hugged Jilly's abdomen. I shivered a bit as all the little golden legs braced Mary, but she was giggling from it. I was still keeping my distance. I didn't like to be tickled. No, this little blind vagrant is just someone I see quite often in these parts. I have tried to eat her numerous times and almost was killed each time by freak accidents. So I decided to just leave her be. I also suggest not trying anything that she doesn't like, Jilly warned me. Interesting, so Mary had some kind of protection thing that made chance work in her favor. That would explain how a blind, cute, and defenseless monster has survived so long in this world. Jilly had also just confessed to trying to eat Mary on numerous occasions like it was nothing. Looks like there were conflicting views here. On one side, there was Mary, who couldn't see the world and all of its ugliness, but she assumed that most people were good at the hippie monster. Then there was Jilly, who was a monster like I had read about for all intents and purposes, but a tad bit more civilized in some senses. She was also an 11 out of 10 if you could just get rid of the bug body and homicidal nature, but you can't win them all. It also didn't look like I was going to be getting rid of her anytime soon, so I might as well take her up on her offer. You said that you can get some wood or something that I can burn, right? I asked Jilly. HM. Oh, that, yes. I can climb to the top and pass some wood down. I wanted to try this new thing out anyways. Okay, so it will work, good, Jilly said, but the last part seemed like she was talking to herself, and I started to get a sneaking suspicion, but I was pulled from my thoughts. I had to watch as Jilly gracefully, and with no effort apparent, crawled almost 50 meters of the waving cliff wall. I had considered trying to climb the wall myself, but even with my new strength and body, there was no way I would chance trying to climb that deadly ascent. Eek. Mary squealed and fell over backward like something had pushed her, and I rushed over to her. You okay? I asked as I slid my arms under Mary to help her up. Meanwhile, above, I could hear some thunderous crashing noises, but I was distracted. There was a mostly naked blind snake woman in my arms, sue me. Oh whoa, that hurts, but I can see something blue. Mary said with unrestrained excitement as she rubbed her head and cuddled into my arms. What? I asked in confusion, but not liking the cuteness I was receiving as the bagging up top intensified. How do you know what the color blue looks like? That was the best I could come up with at the moment, but suddenly the ground shaking and banging from up to stop. I looked into Mary's grinning smile, about to ask her what the screen said, but then a sound similar to a table saw started. Alright, what the hell is that woman doing up there? I said rhetorically, but Mary answered me. I don't know, Mary said so cutely that I just stared at her. I had that one coming for saying it out loud, but I was getting distracted again. Since Mary knew colors, the next most logical thing to think was that she could read, right? What does the blue screen say, Mary? I asked her, but she just shrugged and gave me basically the same answer she had just given, and I was about ready to just throw logic away entirely at this point. I don't know, I can't read, Mary said plainly to me, and I blinked at her. Then how do you know that the screen is blue if you were born blind? I asked, just hoping for a sliver of logic to protrude in this mind-bending conversation, but I had no such luck, and I tossed logic out the window. I don't know, it's blue, Mary said and then cuddled into my chest again. Suddenly, the buzzsaw up top stopped, and silence reigned over the rock-filled canyon. Mary had been slowly wrapping herself around me, and now I had no choice but to carry her, not really a bad thing. I am going to pass everything down, try to make a nice stack. Jilly yelled down as she hung over the edge. Pass down. I could catch. I started to complain, but shut the fuck up and ran for my life with Mary laughing in my arms. The sun behind was blotted out by what I could only assume to be planned and perfectly cut fresh lumber planks of various sizes. What the hell was this witch doing? Boards started to rain down like fat long wooden spears, and I was doing everything in my power not to become a pre-cooked skewer. As I dodged, though, I started to notice something strange. No matter where I moved, the planks just barely missed me, but they did miss me every time. So, I stopped moving and stood still, and the boards rained down around me until I couldn't move, but not a single one touched Mary. I did get a couple gashes, but my body was healing very fast, and now that it was over, I let out a long breath. Whatever Mary's power or ability was, it had just saved my life, and I was glad, but I had a large number of other emotions racing around inside of me. Went up a level. Mary squealed in my arms, and I looked down at her. What was going on here? Level. That sounded like some game BS, and I was starting to develop a sneaking suspicion of what was going on, and when Jilly poked her head over the top of the forest of boards pinning me into place where a bright yellow construction-grade hard hat, I was sure. That damn thing gave the girls both systems just to spite me. Chapter 8. Gods, what are they good for? You are listening at novelfull.audio. So, whatever was overlording this world seemed to have the ability to give out systems as he chose. I don't know if I would call this cheating now that these two miscreants were part of my party, but I was paying for every advantage with attempts on my life so far. Sorry, I guess I can't kill you either with that little snake of snakes wrapped around you. Well, we have the wood, now you need to pile it. Also, are you going to burn that troll or not? Jilly asked me with impatience. If you can help me out, I can start the fire while you pile the wood unless you know how to cook the meat. I questioned Jilly as I watched the hard hat slide off the top of her head and rest on her bare back just below her neck. What SSS going on? Mary hissed up from my arms. Uck, fine, but this better be worth it. Stupid man, can't even kill him. Probably would just leave me wanting more after anyways. Jilly grumbles as she starts to rip the planks off of the ground with ease. Some boards were buried up to a meter deep, driven into the ground. Yet that didn't bother this Hercules beetle of a woman in the slightest. I saw a vast gap already between the two of us, and it was starting to make me second-guess my choice. I decided that for now, I would learn how to do things with Mary attached to me. This female had made it very clear that she would kill me if given a chance, and I wasn't about to let my time in this world end yet. Maybe I would have to try and ditch her at some point. She clearly was nothing more than an acquaintance to Mary, considering that she tried to kill her as well. I wondered what Mary thought of Jilly in terms of whether or not she would be considered a good monster or not. If she was, then that just meant that the rest of the monsters in this world would just be different variations of bad. I could see how she might take on that outlook of other monsters, but it would be something that I would have to clarify with her. Unlike Mary, I didn't possess some kind of superpower that let me avoid danger like she could, and I wouldn't want that. I wasn't completely averse to getting some kind of superpower that I could train and grow with, that would be cool. Jilly almost had a path cleared for me to get out, and I was briefly reminded of the large gap in our strength. If I got a chance for a superpower, I wouldn't pass it up. Not so all-and-mighty then. Hey. So it was you that has been slating my path. Why did you give the girls the systems? Value. Oh, I get it. So, because I don't have one of those system things, you aren't getting any points. What is this kind of big game? What? What is the whole point of it all? Is there a point? I was walking out of the lumber forest, and I got a glare from Jilly and was told to go get working or I would be the one going on the fire. If these two were my help, I was not excited to find out who my enemies were going to be. Not going to spill all the truth about what your real game is, Fine, I didn't mind helping with girls as long as I was the one making a choice on whether or not I would be helping. Mary, can you hold on to my back? I am going to start getting the fire ready, and then I will go cut up some meat, okay? I asked, but Mary was already snaking around back. I smiled as I felt the warm, soft press of her chest on my back as I dug into my pocket. I only had a couple things on me, but a lighter was one of them, and that meant I wouldn't have to go bushman and tried starting a fire by rubbing sticks together. I pulled out my lighter, but it did not look like a light. Instead, it looked like some kind of pen torch now. I pressed the bottom on the side, and a thin but solid stream of flame appeared about a meter long. I almost dropped the thing in shock. What the hell was this thing? It looked like a homemade lightsaber or something that was made in some anarchist basement. How did you get a magical flame blade? You didn't just have that before. You made me pull all of those out for nothing. Jilly screeched from behind me. I whirl around awkwardly as Mary giggled on my back, making them far too close. Jilly reared back in from my vicious barbecue lighter. Ha! Now I had the fire and a weapon that I had never used before. Can I get a skill for this? Chapter 9. The blade, not the right tool for that job. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I got the fire started with minimal risk to my life being applied. Jilly had thrown a couple of the long boards at me, but they went wide, completely missing me. Look, the more you mess around with your vain attempts to kill me, the longer it will take to get the meat down, I said as I walked over to the fallen rock troll that I had killed. Maybe, but you have yet to show me anything that would make me less likely to want to eat you, Jilly said while looking at me hungrily and licking her lips. I ignored her, I was already having enough trouble as it was concentrating with Mary on my back. She had started licking the back of my neck, and I was having trouble staying focused as I walked over to the corpse. This was the hard part now, and I needed to get the meaning of this thing quickly before Jilly decides that she doesn't want to wait for the meat. This woman was getting worse and worse as time went on, and I didn't want to keep relying on Mary to keep me from being eaten. Oh, the troll stinks. Do you really think burning it will make it less smelly? Mary asked, after taking a break from licking my neck. I can't make promises, but I know that there are a couple different kinds of meat that are poisonous if you try to eat it raw or if it hasn't been cooked properly. This meat seems like it will follow the same rules, so we'll just have to wait and see, I said as I cut a large portion of the monster's thigh up with my fancy knife. The 12 cm long blade was beyond weird now. When I had pulled the knife out from my back belt, the blade started to peel like sheets of paper. I was shocked at first and almost tossed the damn thing like I had just realized I had pulled a snake from behind my back and not a rabbit. I had a snake glued to me, so that analogy has kind of puttered, so I held on to the knife for a moment longer, and the rustling blades seemed to calm down. I had approached the thigh of the monster and went to go skin the hairy thigh of the monster. The parts that weren't rock were covered in 3 cm long bristly gray hairs. I cut all the way around just above the knee and split a line down the top to be able to cut the hairy skin off just like any animal I had skinned. As I started to skin it, the blade flayed apart again but then started to extend like ribbons. The knife split into 4 sections, and when I started to pull it through and around the leg, it was like cutting butter with barely any resistance. Once I had finished making a complete circuit around, the meat sagged off the bone in 3 wavy cut sheets. I moved about 50 centimeters up and then scooped up the stinking meat, which was smelling markedly worse than before now that the blood and flesh were exposed. I was feeling less confident about my ability to make this taste better, but I could feel something dripping on my shoulder where Mary was resting her chin. I turned my head to find her cute face drooling dribbles of drool down on me. I would have wiped her face, but my hands were covered in the stinking troll blood, so I just let her be. Maybe just getting rid of the hair and skin made it almost edible to them, but I had to stop Jilly as she approached with more dry wood to throw on the fire. Hey! Wait, don't put more wood on here yet. The fire has finally burned down now, I told Jilly as she dropped the wood and glared at me. It's not making fire anymore. How are you supposed to burn the meat if there is no fire? Jilly growled at me. That I just waved her off and collected some saplings that had been knocked down in her attempt on my life. After gathering 6 long and fresh ones that wouldn't burn quickly, I pulled my knife back out and tried to hack off the extra small branch on each one. Tried was the key word here. My new fancy knife wasn't having any part of it and actually twisted or bent out of the way every time I tried to hack a branch off. What the heck, what is your problem, knife? I asked the writhing blade, not really expecting an answer. In response, the blade fanned out into multiple blades and then extended towards the meat. I watched as the blade began dissecting the meat, cutting, and lifting out the thick blood-filled veins with the precision of a surgeon. I just stood dumbly with my arm out at the blade, prepared the meat, and then stabbed the piss out of it after tenderizing it. The left side of my shirt where Mary was resting was soaked, and I kept having to bat away snake tongues that were getting too close to my ears. Finally, the blade finished its handiwork, and I was left with a pile for roughly 5 by 20.5 cm steaks. After putting the blade away, I pulled out the fire sword, hacked off the offending limbs on my saplings, and set them across the fire. I had moved stones to set them on, so there was up just a bit, then I tossed the steaks on that were only smelling slightly rancid. After watching the blade do all the work, I was getting hungry. I tossed the steaks onto the fire and lined things all up. Jilly was hovering over me as she did, but she wasn't bothering me, just watching with interest. The meat began to sizzle, and soon all traces of the rancid smell were gone. Cooking meats replaced that, and even my mouth started to salivatate. Is it SSS Donis yet? Mary hissed with drool, now reaching my mud and blood cover pants, but she was still fucking cute. Chapter 10. Unique requirements, but did I have a choice? You are listening at novelfull.audio. After having to hold Mary under my arm and fend off Jilly with the fire sword for about 15 minutes, turning them once, they were done. The smell of the meat was quite good, and it filled the air, so I could see why it had to keep the girls back. This was probably the best thing that either of them had ever smelled. The bit of human in each of them yearned for the complexity of flavor. Eating fresh meat was probably second nature to them and every other monster. If they could all eat it raw, why would they try to cook? Now, I grabbed some burnt point short spear that I used to skewer the steaks. I was tempted to give Jilly hers right away in payment for trying to kill me, but instead, I spent 5 minutes running around waving meat sticks around while holding Mary off. I was trying to cool them off, but Jilly took it as me running away. Instead, being the intelligent centipede, had decided not to chase me. Instead, she grabbed one of the hot steaks that I had pulled away from the main coals. I turned around and started to run back, letting Mary have her meat stick that was not cooled enough now. I tried to call out to Jilly to stop as I felt the hot juices drip down my back from the meat Mary was eating. I had noticed that even though the meat stunk and it was a bit dark, the fat marbling was excellent, and the steak was almost 3 fingers thick when I put them on. I watched helplessly as Jilly savagely and hot greasy juice squirted out, and then all hell broke loose. My mouth hurts. I am dying. It burns. Jilly squealed as she writhed in pain. Maybe flailing was a more apt description of the dangerous way her body and tapered legs were flying around. I pulled off my shirt and attempted to get close to her. Jilly, I know it hurts, but calm down, and I will wipe you off. The steaks weren't that hot, and they will be just minor burns, I said calmly while holding out my mostly soaked shirt and her meat stick in the other. Jilly had a wild look in her eyes, but she started to slow down, so I kept slowly advancing. I had to trust that Mary's system would keep me safe. Jilly was calming down now, and she was starting to lower herself to me, and she was starting to look less like a monster. I was distracted by the moment, so it was hard to be surprised at how she acted. I Gertzes, a new skill. Mary cried out as she must have been finishing chewing some meat. The sound didn't seem to bother Jilly as she continued to lower herself to me, but Mary reached her free hand forward. A bottle of green liquid and a white towel appeared, and they fell to the ground because I had no free hands to grab them. I stopped and dropped my shirt and scooped up the almost drier fresh and soft white bath towel. This was something different, but I had to focus on Jilly, who was now right in front of me with a whimpering look on her face. I slowly and gently wiped the grease off, but the burns had left red lines and splotches all over her beautiful and fair skin. Once I was done, I grabbed the bottle of green stuff, and I was pretty sure what it was, and when I picked up the bottle and tried shaking it around, I was sure. I took the top off and shook out wired aloe vera gel that could be used to help soothe and treat wounds. I started to put some on her neck and chest area, trying not to give too much thought to the voluptuous breast that I was fondling in the process. After I finished applying the gel, I took a step back and then gaped in surprise. All the burns were gone, only the slightly wet-looking spots were the only reminder of where they had once been. I handed Jilly their meat stick I had set off the side in the ground for her and then looked at the bottle of gel in my hands. Then it exploded into a scentless puff of smoke that didn't even seem real, but the bottle was gone. At the same time, the cloth exploded the same, and I was left staring stupidly. Whatever that stuff was, it was more than just standard aloe vera gel. Nothing could have healed minor burns that fast. It was like magic. Magic. Jilly, is there magic in this world? I asked seriously as Jilly was enjoying her meat, slowly this time. I went and sat back at my rock by the fire and grabbed one of my steaks. The one Jilly had tossed was about 8 meters away. Yeah, we are magic, and the sword and dagger you have are magic, Jilly said between bites. Okay, then what do you do for money in this world? What I mean is, what do you pay this rent that you owe with? I asked after taking a bite of the meat. The flavor was very bland and a bit gamey, but it was better than pickled eggs, so good enough for me, and it was protein. I need to keep eating if I want to keep my girlish figure up. MP or monster points, there are people all over that you can do tasks for, and some you can do more than once if they need the same job done. Others will just pop up, but sometimes they are too hard to complete, Jilly explained as she came over and took my other 2 pieces of meat. She was about to eat both of the steaks, but then she noticed Mary hanging over my shoulder, sniffing the air. I had to put a hand up because the snakes were licking the air as well. Jilly sighed but handed the second piece over to Mary, who took it gratefully. I savored my single piece of meat as the girl both let out satisfied sighs of relief. At least they were happy, was my thought, but then something the annoying God was back.